As healthcare organizations continue to adopt new digital tools and connected technologies, building security into procurement from the very beginning has never been more important. When you think about the hundreds of partners that a healthcare system has in that ecosystem, this topic is tremendously important. And I believe uh, one that not enough organizations do enough due diligence on. So it's very important for us to really listen to Ed, our next speaker, because he offers some insights that can save a lot of headache down the road and how to best deal with all the hundreds of different partners we deal with day to day and how our ecosystems have increased, how they negotiate with other organizations' ecosystems as well. So it's about really global protection here in a cyber world. So with that, please join me in welcoming Edward Estrada, the Chief Digital Compliance Officer at Premier Inc. Edward is an accomplished and certified digital risk compliance leader with more than 25 years of experience in healthcare. He is driven by a commitment to ensuring that Premier's digital strategy, infrastructure, systems, and services are built with the highest levels of security, quality, innovation, and integrity. As Premier's Chief Digital Compliance Officer, Edward has established a comprehensive compliance framework that monitors digital protection capabilities and provides assurance to executive leadership, oversight committees, and customers. His approach ensures that any risks are effectively managed, enabling Premier to achieve business goals while also maintaining compliance with laws, regulations, and contractual requirements. So today, Edward will be presenting Secure from the Start, Cyber Due Diligence in Purchasing, exploring what organizations should look for when evaluating connected medical devices and technology solutions. Everyone, as a quick reminder, we had a great Q&A in the last session, so please take advantage of that Q&A box, submit your questions, and we'll definitely have time at the end to go through them. So, Edward, I turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Andri, and I want to thank WellLink for engaging with me in this extremely important subject. And it's critical given our dynamic and growing threat environment from a digital perspective. But before I get into the due diligence and due care piece, because due diligence and due care, those are actions, right? They're actions within a larger program, a larger governance system. And first, I want to set the context around, well, managing your digital assets through its useful life and the programs that surround that. And so pieces of it, and you see it here, is that you need to have a governance program that's cross-functional. It oversees the life cycle of any technology that impacts your organization's environment, from planning all the way to decommission. Effective governance requires you to define a strategy, establish a model, and criteria for the risk tolerance that your organization has, and develop a device lifecycle management plan or an asset lifecycle management plan. And another critical piece of it is how you communicate. How you communicate requires ongoing and comprehensive communication between stakeholders, which of the stakeholders are. So you can set the expectations for what your ongoing communications are with your overall program, within your overall program, both internally and externally. You will identify upfront what the expectations are and support what those expectations are and reinforce them during the entirety of the life cycle of your assets. And another key piece of this is the risk management, which is, well, how do you manage risk throughout your whole program? You can communicate, you have a governance, you have a life cycle program. Well, how do you manage the risks that are associated with it? Well, some of the challenges that we see in managing risks has to do with the volume of technology assets that we have to assess. In an enterprise like Premier, our internal assets, we're talking anywhere between 30 and 50,000. For a large system, you can double and sometimes triple that. And it becomes a challenge as far as being able to wrap your arms around that. And the programs and the communication and the expectation need to be imbued throughout your program to be able to deal with that volume, as well as the platforms that you have to deal with it. Another is the lack of information regarding the controls, your digital controls around those assets that you're putting in your system, right? Which I'll be getting to in a little bit regarding the due diligence and care piece of what you have available to you, that is industry standard now, and the type of diligence that actually gives, and what you need to do internally, right? And I'll be getting to that in a moment when we talk about the actual phases of the asset lifecycle, right? And the third, but certainly not least, is managing legacy assets, those legacy technologies, in a way that ensure that these technologies don't become legacy unexpectedly, to make sure that you're getting the most out of them, the quality, as well as the security along with it. So let's go into the phases a little bit. I know it's a little obscured because of my sharing here, but the first is within your program, you're planning, right? You identify a need for a new technology, and you perform an operational assessment to assess your environment and the capability and your capabilities, as well as you want to model those conditions that are needed to be accommodated by both internally by your teams, by your infrastructure, and externally by the vendor. And in order to adequately manage risk, you need to understand fully and have a command over both. And then there is, once that's done, is the acquisition and deployment. Ensure that the terms and conditions of your purchased assets, the agreements, align with your operational requirements. You just went through planning. You understand and have a command over your internal capabilities as well as external. You have an agreed upon criteria, conditions of satisfaction, and how that's going to be met for each asset, and who's going to be responsible for what, and what are the measures? How are you monitoring that? All of that is verified in your legal agreements. And once those are satisfied, you have an operational plan during that planning stage to that you can execute. And then there's the operations and the maintenance. And while the digital solution is under support, and you have patches and are generally available from the data management perspective or technology provider. During this stage, you should execute the plan that you had originally set forth during planning for ongoing maintenance and ongoing monitoring. And then we get to decommission and disposal. Replacing or decommissioning a digital solution should be the execution of a well-architected plan that has been set forth all up to and refined all up through this point. And regardless of whether something is a planned or unplanned event, try and plan for those unplanned events, or actually have controls in order to deal with those unplanned events. So all of that towards ensuring that the removal or disposal of residual patient data and other sensitive data like user, and network credentials and the like, and intellectual property and technologies is disposed of properly and according to your conditions of satisfaction, and that you have the measures to ensure that that is being done, and in some cases, evidence to make sure that that's done. So that's the construct. right? And within the construct, I was talking about planning before, right? And a part of that planning and diligence is so let me talk for a second about due diligence and care and the difference between the two. So not to get too didactic, but the due diligence is um, all of that work that you're doing, research, reviewing, assessment prior to, and assurance that you're getting that the digital asset that you're bringing into your environment is at a level that you are comfortable with, right? And that your organization is comfortable with consuming. And the care piece is, well, all of that work that you're doing afterwards, understanding what the capabilities are and or the lack of capabilities are in order to bring that in-house, in order to now bring that into your environment. So with that as a foundation for the rest of what we're going to discuss here is a popular, I shouldn't say popular, an industry expected part of due diligence is getting attestations. Attestations and are those things that you would get like a SOC 2 report from an objective, reputable, and licensed third party relative to an industry standard, right? And also to a specific framework. And this is extremely important that I think that a lot of us lose sight of sometimes is, for example, for let's say that you get a SOC 2, right? System and organization control 2 report. Now, that is based on the AICPA, it's trust service principles, and there are several of them. And those requirements are also based upon the service level commitments that your organization, that the vendor has to any of the organizations that they provide their services and or digital assets for and to. Knowing that prism is okay, you're going to get assurance relative to those specific controls for those specific conditions that are set for those service level commitments as it is articulated in the report, right? It is not a silver bullet. It's not saying, okay, everything that the seller and or vendor produces has these controls in place that were tested, and they were tested in this way, and here was the results, and this is what management, the vendor, turned around and said, this is what we're doing relative to any of the observations that were found. All well and good, but that is for a specific through a specific prism, and you need to set your aperture of what you're going to get assurance about relative to one, what you're bringing in again during the planning stages. How are we bringing, what is this that we're bringing in? What's it going to impact? And what specifically do I need assurances over? Maybe a SOC 2 won't do it, right? Let's say that you even get an MDS2, you get ISO, you get high trust. All of these, except for the MDS2, are attestations, right? How they did relative to this to these specific control criteria. While it's good, it's a great indicator. Remember the programs and the process is once you set those conditions, you want to look relative to, well, what are our internal capabilities? I understand what this says. I understand that they fared this way, and this is what was tested. But here's what our capabilities are. And I'll give you an example in a moment regarding specific conditions and type of conversations that we have had internally and that that we've seen members have regarding what they need assurance over relative to the digital assets, not only that are on our catalog, but they're considering bringing into their digital environment. So it's important to keep this in mind, is know what these attestations are and what they are not. I've had several conversations with vendors and partners, business partners, where they've adjusted their aperture and their reliance as on these attestations relative to their specific needs. Because at one point it was really common in the industry and in our environment to just say, I got this attestation, I'm going to move on now. I've done my due diligence, and all is good. I can sleep well. And we know that is not the case. It's the beginning, and it is an affirmation of all the criteria that's set up to this point in your program, and knowing where that actually sits. And so, knowing that, there is the how does this play into, remember, we're talking about acquisition before. You did all the planning, you're doing the assessment, you look at, you adjust your prism, you get your attestations. Let's say that you get the controls, information over the controls for that asset that you're bringing into your organization. And you are comfortable with what you have. Then it becomes a point, well, we need to make sure that we have also communicated our standards. Remember, internally and externally to the vendor. And one tool of many, but one tool to do it is through contractual guarantees. Is what are the contractual baseline standards that you're going to have relative to all those attestations that you had? They may be baseline regardless of the attestations. And some of those baseline standards that you want to get assurance over from a care perspective, I understand that your attestation said this. Well, I'd like to have that written in our contractual guarantee. Because remember, an attestation is not a contractual guarantee. None of the attestations are contractual guarantees. And having those standards from the get-go, well understood, of what the ramifications are internally and externally, is paramount to not only mitigating risk or minimizing risk from a cyber perspective, but and also making sure that your quality markers are out there and understood and agreed upon on how they're going to be realized. But it also helps with the getting the most out of the life of the digital asset, because that has to be set contractually way beforehand, as you're going and you're looking at vendors. So understand what these baseline standards are. And I told you that I would give you an example. So setting the baseline standard, let's say like a vulnerability disclosure and reporting program, a VDRP. If something goes wrong, you have an incident, invariably there will be an incident. The incident will be either on the vendor's side, and it could be generated from a not a timely patch that they put out. It could be anything from their hosted environment, and there is a vulnerability that was found in the hosted environment. You need to be notified. Having that as on what you expect. One, that you expect a VDRP, a vulnerability disclosure reporting program, right? And first, that you expect it, Two, what are your conditions under which that is to be operated and you are to be notified, or you are, and how you're to be notified? Who, how, when, how often, what happens after? All of that are conditions that you want to set up front in contracts and agreements. And as you're doing that, again, you're assessing your environment and the capabilities, and and understanding internally, okay, well, our capabilities, and we expect our vulnerability management controls internally require it go through this channel. This person sees it, and this is our expectation to our customers, or our clients, our provider, people that depend on us or that use our services and or solutions. Is all of that is taken into account, and you know your red line. Well, I can, if the seller or the vendor comes back with a condition that you know that that is unacceptable, then that becomes a point of, well, you're establishing your risk tolerance at that point. What is it that that you are going to um, feel comfortable? Your organization is going to feel comfortable absorbing, and that has to be a part of your plan. The overall governance, communication, life cycle, and risk management plan, and it's constantly updated, and it is tuned to the dynamic risk tolerance of your organization. I'd love to say that my or any organization's risk tolerance is always going to be here or here. It's not. It's dynamic. There are things that are untouchable. You know, the red lines, that are constant. But taking all of these things, the due diligence piece, and performing the due care that I'm talking about, is a dynamic event. They are continuous, and the tolerance and the risk appetite will fluctuate as a result of that. And that is the hallmarks of a not only a healthy program, but a healthy organization. Um, the the alacrity with which that your organization performs it, and how steadfast they remain in executing on the controls that are necessary to support it, both from an operational perspective, as far as people are concerned, knowledge, the communication, as well as platform decisions that need to be made, and budgetary decisions. All of those are linked. But the cyber due diligence in purchasing is this. It's all of this activity, and the baselines and the internal look, at your organization, your capabilities, the continuous ones, and the cross-functional collaboration that's necessary to do this and keep this a dynamic exercise, is all a part of the due diligence in purchasing. And I can tell you, as far as Premier is concerned, and those assets that are on our catalog, we perform a first line diligence and apply the standards that we have, for our vendors, and that are expectations, from the industry, which include all of our digital assets, is something that we provide to anything that is digital that is on our catalog. And we make those conditions that are put in there, that they place on our contractual guarantees. We call that Exhibit J. It's a cyber exhibit, where we place those baseline guarantees or baseline expectations, of which the vendor that wants to be in our catalog, we will go through and either accept, redline, or propose changes. And whether, however, those changes are done, we make those readily apparent to all participating vendors via our participating members via our platform. So you can see the changes. So you can understand, well, when they said VDRP, when they say vulnerability disclosure reporting program, they redlined it, or they put a condition on it that I need to understand, I need to be aware of. And so with that, I wanted to open it up for some questions. I went through a lot, and I appreciate you engaging with me. And so open for questions.
Thank you so much, Edward. All right, let's see. We have a question from Alicia. How can healthcare organizations encourage greater transparency from vendors without slowing down procurement?
No, that's a great question. It's the balance of what are those conditions. You have to set those, because we found that as well. I mean, it's setting the conditions that are bottom line, absolutely 100% required by your organization in order to feel comfortable. And no matter what, if those baseline conditions create consternation or some stumbling in the procurement process, it's stumbling that your organization is signing off on, right? You can't do that in a silo. The conditions that I set for Premier is not something that I do by myself. It's a cross-functional team. The chief information officer, as well as general counsel, as well as vendor management, as well as our product team, all of them that are getting impacted by it, we agree on these are the conditions. And if all are agreed, and that causes some stumbling by some vendors, it's worth the care, the due care, because and I tell my colleagues this: I'm never going to rush in to make a mistake, right? Just as long as everybody's on the same page and we stack hands, then how that process goes is what our organization is comfortable with. But yeah, I would streamline it to not have any fluff. Just keep it bones. And that's what we do, and that's what we've seen be successful. But thank you. That's a great question.
And as a follow-up, Alicia is asking, how do we work with smaller local suppliers who may not have the most mature cybersecurity readiness?
No, that's a great question. You sculpt it to you sculpt your conditions relative, and remember I was talking about the prism and the aperture. You have, and we have small sellers as well. It has to be surgical to the asset itself. For example, if we have wearables, right? We have our baseline conditions that are set for just baseline. We will refine those baseline conditions based upon that wearable, that digital asset, and only structure it for that. And those conditions that we set, and again, the conditions are key. The conditions that we set, um, it doesn't matter if they're big, if they're small. It's like these are the uh, these are the minimum standards that you would need to meet in order to be put into our environment. It doesn't take a large investment. Um, I'll give you an example. Um, Encrypting data in transit and at rest. If that is applicable, making sure that data is encrypted, right? That let's say a hosted solution will send out is key. It's it's not a money issue. It's not how large or small a vendor is, or a startup. It's those are the the ABC 1, 2, 3 of what you are, the product that you are creating. And so, but yeah, we um, we architect the aperture to be precisely to what the product that the vendor is offering, because otherwise it's just fluff. It doesn't help them, doesn't help us. It's just fluff.
Reminds me of what you said earlier, where you have your red lines that do not cross, and then you have to be fluid around everything also to specific situations. Perfect. Now
Absolutely.
we have two-parter from Daniel here.
Mhm.
What is one question every hospital leader should ask a vendor before buying new technology to ensure cybersecurity is properly protected? And then the second part is there anything to look out for when making a purchase that stands out as a good or a bad?
So the question I would ask is what, and I asked this of several of my colleagues, what are what is this providing to us?
Mhm.
And how are we going to implement this into our organization? Those are the questions that are asked over and over and over and over again. They're simple, but they are simple is never easy. It's um, it's engaging in the conversation, because that begets more conversations. That begets an engagement. Um, what you want to guard against is going solo around a digital decision, regardless of the pressures that you get. You want to bring in your colleagues and say, how are we going to do this? Um, that I understand that takes time, but it's time well spent. And I'm sorry, the second part of that,
The second part of the question is there anything to look out for when making a purchase that stands out as a good or a bad?
um, a good is when the vendor offers a lot of information, current information ab- about their asset, like the technical aspects of the asset, how they are protecting it, how they developed it, all of that. The the more that they give you, and the more that is um, let's say human readable, because it can get really nerdy really quick. But the things that should resonate and that are good are how it's encrypted, how they develop it, what they are going to be covering as far as patches are concerned, support, where the data is. Those types of things are all good things when you hear it, because you can make a decision on it. I'd like to say that data is neither good nor bad. It's inherently, it's just that you get it is awesome, and that it's accurate even better. The thing that I would guard against is the opposite of that is I'll just take our word for it, or you don't need to know that, or um, a lot of hand wringing, whether that is in meetings or um, in documents, because you can actually see hand wringing in documents. Is you say I need X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden that becomes a condition in a negotiation. The more that you see that on baseline things that your organization considers like this is table stakes, that's a huge red flag.
I think that brings us to the end of questions. Seems like we had all of them posted. Thank you so much, Edward. I mean, it's been an excellent and highly practical look at building cybersecurity into purchasing from the very beginning. My personal main takeaway is that cybersecurity is not built in isolation anymore. In our world, we need to have the proper partners or help them get cyber readiness there that can meet our personal goals and levels of security. And then so that cyber risk is no longer a downstream issue. If you tackle it right at the beginning, you don't have to worry about it later on, at least not that impactful aspect of when a breach has happened because of a partner.